Live streams with Fourth Wave. So we are all writers on Medium, where writers get paid, like Patsy always says. And this topic is actually a very special one. We're going to be talking about the hypersexualization of women and girls. And we have a very special guest with us, Natasha Walter, who is the author of five very interesting books, one of which is Living Dolls, The Return of Sexism. Yes, look at that. Amazing, yes. And it's honestly because I had your book when I was in university. I was in university like 2012, and we were all very fascinated with the way that you handled the conversation around hypersexuality and how, yes, there was a point where a lot of women thought that this was a very empowering thing, but there
Yeah,
is nuance. There's a lot of nuance to the way that we handle women's sexuality. At the end of the day, whether you are overtly sexual or you keep that hidden, you're more modest. At the end of the day, you're still someone who's commodified in the media. So I'm so glad to have you here. And I'll give you the floor for a minute also to talk about the book and your new book, Feminism for a World on Fire. So please
no,
tell us a little bit more.
thank you so much. And thank you so much for having me in this feminist community. It's really great to be here today. Yeah, no, and I love hearing that, you read the book soon after it came out then, I guess, because it came
Yes,
out in 2010. And I mean, I
yes,
was just looking back at it actually, because I got it off the shelves, because I thought coming on to talk about this book rather than my latest book. So it's interesting because so much, I mean, we'll dig into this more, I'm sure, as the conversation goes on. But obviously, so much of what I was writing about in that book is still so current, feels so close, still feels so real.
yes,
But of course, also things have changed. Things have changed a
yes,
lot. And I do feel, if I was writing that book now, there are some things that would be the same, but a lot I think that would be different, including the tone, I think, and in places, I think our discussions, my feminism has changed since then. So it's a book that deals, just for people who don't know, it's a book that deals particularly with the hypersexualization of young women, the kind of
mhm,
mainstreaming of pornography, that new
yes,
acceptability that we were seeing in the 1990s and early 2000s around what was called glamour modeling in the UK, or sort of soft pornography, the more mainstream acceptability of sex work, and kind of how that was creating new pressures for young women and also for young men. This
absolutely.
feeling for a lot of young women I talked to that they couldn't find a way to be valued in the world unless they kind of stepped into that kind of sexualization, being visibly sexualized, treated as a sexual object in a very sort of narrow way. So that's the kind of basis of the book. And the book that I've just published, Feminism for a World on Fire, is a wider look at where feminism is now, looking at economics around the devaluation of work, and particularly the intersection of the degradation of women's rights and the climate emergency. So it's a very different book that goes into some very different places, but there is a thread, you know, between the two books.
Yes, and honestly, even just the fact that when I saw that your book was coming out, I was so excited to bring it to Fourth Wave and the rest of the women here, because there were, like you said, a lot of threads that still hold true today, and now we are in a new world, and it's still holding on to tradition, but at the same time we all have advanced so much, especially with technology. The way that things are going has changed so dramatically. So now, before we continue, I'd also love for the rest of the speakers to give us a little introduction about yourselves. We normally go alphabetically, so that would usually be Martine, Patsy, and Suzanne. And so tell us just what do you do? How are you connected to us at Fourth Wave? What do you think of the topic? What excited you? What made you want to be here? And yeah, let's take it away with Martine.
Right. Hi, everyone, and thank you for having me. I'm a recent addition to Fourth Wave. I just published a few days ago my essay, which is very on topic because it's about the male gaze and specifically how women have internalized the male gaze. And I think it's been particularly relevant over the past 20, 30 years or so as media in general has become very saturated with very sexualized, objectified images of women. I think, especially in the late 90s and the early 2000s, it was especially bad. And then with social media becoming a global phenomenon, it has reached new height because so many women have had a possibility of turning themselves into an object to be observed, which was not a possibility before. So, yes, that was the main theme of my essay. I am originally from Italy. I live in Canada now, so I'm very glad to be here.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. And now on to Patsy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Patsy Ferguson. I'm the editor-in-chief of Fourth Wave. We're an international magazine on Medium where writers get paid. So I always say that because I like people to look for us there and support our writing. Um, Let's see, I got a little, oh, we have 70,000 followers there. So I have to do
Yes.
my little pitch. But I love this topic. I'm so interested in it. And I'm so glad to be here. What kind of strikes me so much is the way women's bodies look so artificial these days. The rise in plastic surgery and the way women have these enormous breasts and big behinds and big lips, and they almost look like sex dolls. And I feel like these poor women have been hoodwinked into actually physically, surgically changing their bodies. And I feel bad about that. And I also see a connection to the horrific treatment of women worldwide as if sex is all they have to offer. Women are playing into that game by becoming sex dolls, living dolls, and as a I don't want to blame women, but as a result, there's a lot of misogyny and a lot of misunderstanding that women are human beings. So anyway, I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you so much for coming as well, Patsy. Now on to Susanna. Tell us about you.
Hi, I'm Susanna Quintana, and I am a lifelong writer and also on Medium with my publication, The Virago, which has 27,000 followers and exponentially growing ever since I took it over years ago. So super proud about that and all of our amazing women writers. This topic is fascinating to me. I actually got my second bachelor's degree at the age of 51. Yes. Women and gender studies, and did just such a deep dive into just being fascinated with gender, race, and class and how those intersect. Nowadays, like what I've always been fascinated with is this idea of the male gaze and how patriarchal that is, and how so many women we just, including myself, for decades, as of not realizing that we're in that what I see is like the matrix. And what I love now, what's going on is this conversation. I see it on TikTok. A lot of conversation about this very thing, about this these two things going on, like Patsy, what you said, as far as what we're seeing in Hollywood with all the women who are turning into these, they almost look AI, right? And so which is deeply disturbing, of the rise of AI, of how it's being used by men. But then beyond that, with what I see on TikTok is this conversation about realizing that we are in the patriarchy and well, I have an even better view of it because now I'm in Mexico, the beautiful country of Mexico. So I feel like I'm on the outside looking in now of what I used to be in America. But yes, I'm just fascinated with this idea of how when women are in the patriarchy, what is our purpose there? We're just there for the male gaze, and then and all that comes with it is we're objectified and we're thrown away when we're not wanted anymore, and when the only thing that we are wanted for is this superficial um like need for men to take from us what they and then toss us to the side. So anyway, this topic is just like super fascinating, especially how it plays out like in the media and stuff. And growing up in the 70s and the 80s when we were literally trained to see ourselves as these dolls, as Natasha's book title says, when we see uh let's say the Victoria's Secret whole pink brand, right? Is that women are infantilized to this standard where, and now we're playing into it. Like that's what scares me the most about these AI dolls.
Yes, no, all amazing points, especially the fact that you brought up things about Hollywood. And also, that is something that is focused on in Natasha's book as well. There is an idea of what you see on screen is very different. It's a stark contrast from what you see in real life. So now, of course, I'm your host. My name is Sangeeta. I'm sorry I forgot to do my own introduction. I can see that look on Patsy's face. So my name is Sangeeta. I'm an Indian. I was born and raised in the Middle East. My school was British, and now I live in Italy. So I have a very varied lens when it comes to this kind of thing. And so the interest as well was in watching, when I watched movies, so just bringing in a little bit of personal flavor here. Indian movies, there is an archetype of the heroine or the woman who's the protagonist. She's not really a protagonist. She's kind of his sidekick in a lot of ways. He's the protagonist. The man is always the central character, and she's just there to be his love interest. So that's one woman. And then there's another woman called the item girl who does these performances. She kind of puts on, slinky clothing and either pole dances or belly dances or some other type of exoticized dancing. And she's always the most kind of capitalized on character, but she usually has the least screen time and she has the least payment. And that was a reality for a long time. Now, Indian audiences love to watch that woman, right? Some movies literally were sold out constantly because men wanted to watch just that 3-minute clip of the item girl dancing. And this is the least paid person in the production team. So in contrast, though, we have also something in India that's called honor killings, where women are being killed for being sexual, for wanting to own that sexuality, for wanting to live their life on their own terms. And so, coming back to Natasha, I really wanted to understand from you, since you mentioned already that there has been a change in your feminism, as well as the way that you talk about it. Now, I know Feminism for a World on Fire, when I was reading it, a lot of it is about climate impact as well. So
Yeah.
I would love to get into that. But coming back to the point where you said, oh, I have changed my stance a little bit. Would you elaborate that for me, please?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing I would say about my book, Living Dolls, is I'm looking at quite a narrow sphere. I'm very much looking at white women in Britain, and it doesn't really take a global picture, which I think is, in a way, it's a weakness of the book. But I think it also allowed me to sort of home in on a particular phenomenon. And just going back, I just wanted to pick up on something that as Susanna was saying, about seeing how these conversations have been flourishing recently, actually, women, just like we are now, women pushing back on the narrative. It's interesting because that is a shift, I'll be honest, since I published Living Dolls. It's hard to put yourself back into what feminism felt like 16 years ago, right? It's hard to remember what that felt like. But I just want to share this one thing, which is one of the reasons why I sat down to write that book. And it was because a young woman got in touch with me she was a teenager, not from a particularly advantaged or privileged background, someone who was struggling with it. And she wrote to me because I'd just written an article that for me was quite a kind of bit of a throwaway article about those lads magazines. There used to be all those magazines, like Nuts and Loaded and everything. And I'd written something in the Guardian, just a short article about how, I didn't like them, thought they were problematic, didn't like the sort of mainstreaming of pornography that was in them. And this young woman wrote to me and she said, "Thank God you wrote that article. I thought I was the only woman in the world that felt this way about seeing pornography in the mainstream. I thought I was the only girl in the world that didn't like it when her boyfriend was looking at this stuff. I thought I was the only girl that doesn't like going to a club and being felt up by the guys." She felt so isolated in her community in Essex. She felt completely alone. And I got that letter and I just thought, how can this be that 200 years after the birth of Western feminism, we've got girls in Britain saying, "I thought I was the only girl that didn't like pornography." So that was very much the sort of starting place for my book, to restart that conversation that seemed to have died out among young women, but also older women, about what does it feel like? It felt like the water was warming, that metaphor of the frog in the water that warms and warms and warms, and then it gets to boiling. When do we want to hop out of the water? And that has changed since publishing the book. And I think, the internet has driven so many awful developments. The rise of online misogyny, the mainstreaming of violent pornography. Let's come back to that because I think we need to unpack that more. But one thing, of course, it's done is open up spaces like these, right? Where we can get together globally, in different countries, different experiences, but with this common thread, we don't like it. We don't like the mainstream of pornography. We don't like the hypersexualization. We want to do something about it. We want to connect, and I think that sense of women's shared understanding of our experiences under patriarchy has never been stronger. More and more women calling themselves feminists, more and more women wanting to sort of kick back. So I think, we're going to talk, I'm sure, more about all the stuff that's going wrong. But let's remember that, that it's great to be here and, to be connecting to other people, women listening in and being able to have those conversations without the gatekeeping of men that we had to go through in the past.
Absolutely. And I think something amazing that you also touched upon was the fact that the more we talk about it, the easier we make it for other women to say what they actually feel about it, especially ones in places that cannot be on a platform but still want to be heard. I think that's a very amazing point. So actually, the next thing that I'm gonna ask the rest of the speakers, like Martine, Patsy as well, is do you have a thing that like this, very similar to this, where, for example, in Italy, for me, when I moved here, I was very shocked at the machismo, the way that the men don't in club culture really just do push themselves kind of on you, and you don't really feel 100% safe to say anything, but it's normalized also because, oh, Italian men are really beautiful, right? So why would it matter if a beautiful man is trying to push himself on you? You should be okay with it. So Martine, would you also tell me a little bit more? Is there a story like this you might have from between Canada and Italy?
Yeah, actually, it's interesting because I wrote an essay about this very thing because I left Italy when I was 19. So I feel like I was not exposed to the whole machismo and misogynistic practices as much as other women who have lived there longer. But then I had this conversation with my cousin who lived most of her life in Italy, and I was absolutely shocked at the stories that she told me. She told me about instances in the professional workplace where she had superiors or she had professors in college who were absolutely making obvious advances at her or at other women, and it was simply considered part of the culture. And because after I left Italy, I moved to the US, and that was around the time that Me Too took over. It
Yes.
became a very different culture where something like this would never have been allowed, or almost never. We're not quite there yet, but yeah, I was shocked at just how normalized this whole culture of misogyny and rape culture was
Yes.
in Italy. Yes.
Yes, absolutely. And
Mm-hmm.
also, another thing that you brought up that was very interesting was when you bring up the US, because Patsy's going to be our next speaker. When you bring up the US, I think there is also this idea that because it's the West, nothing bad really happens as compared to the East,
Mm-hmm.
right? But I think that's not necessarily true. You see a lot and you go through a lot. Patsy, if you could shine a light on this for us, that would be great.
Okay, I should have written down this. My ideas come in and go out my head too
Oh,
fast.
sorry.
But I just wanted to say on the fourth wave masthead, there's a woman holding a sign that says in Spanish, "You don't protect us, you
You're
rape
right.
us." And when I first published that story, that was the first time I ever heard the word femicide. And I thought, oh, it's so terrible. They have a lot of femicide in Mexico. And then when I looked it up, I found out that we in the United States have femicide. It's just never discussed. And 3 women a day are killed by their intimate partners, their husbands, ex-husbands, ex-boyfriends, or wannabe boyfriends. That's a lot of murder. And I had never heard the word before. So I think a lot of our statistics are suppressed. And in fact, the president now is erasing things from the public record and
Mhm.
from websites and making it even more difficult to know what's going on. I also remember the first time I heard about an incel, I was like, oh, these are horrible, outlandish people who hate women and think they're owed sex and owed a partner. And now it's like mainstream culture. I mean, all the trolls, all those online forums, these people are just gaining, gaining, gaining. But at the same time, it feels like just life has accelerated because of technology. So at the
Yeah.
same time, Me Too, when Me Too happened, I was shocked. I mean, I'm a Me Too. Yeah, it happened to me too. And I kind of felt before Me Too that people knew that was happening, but they didn't care. But
Mm.
once everybody started saying Me Too, we started caring. And maybe we knew, but it was a secret. And we had to not shame our family or whoever it was doing the harm. And now the culture has shifted where we call people out, we ask for accountability. So, I mean, a lot is changing. I'm forgetting the original question. But I've spent all my life in the US, and boy, uh, it's a lot different and has always been a lot different than I understood, than was portrayed in the media. There's
Mhm.
been like like I saw a brilliant movie about James Baldwin that juxtaposed Doris Day going, "Oh, is my boyfriend coming tonight?" And I was a big Doris Day fan as a child, and I thought that was the world, just trying to line up a date. And meanwhile, the Black community was being lynched, jailed, harassed, and but nobody, we weren't aware, or we weren't. It wasn't easy to get that information. So
Mm.
so I feel like I'm just thrilled that information is more readily available, but it's also scary and upsetting because so much of it is horrible. And I'll stop there, but hopefully I answered the question.
No, you did beautifully. That was pretty much the question. Yes. How have things been in the US? Now, Susanna, your case is also very interesting because you used to be in the US, now you're in Mexico. So it's kind of the same question at you as well. What do you feel about the differences between cross-culturally as well as interculturally about um, not just hypersexualization, but just also that movement of information? Do you feel um, watched, or do you feel like you have the ability to observe as well?
Um, so I living in Mexico, I've lived here for a year and a half, and I'm actually just an hour away from the Arizona southern border, and I grew up in
Oh,
Arizona. So there's a lot of Americans that come down here. So I have both views. I have like three views. So I'm an American living in Mexico, that I live in a place where I'm really immersed in the culture. That's what I love about being down here. I don't go to the touristy place. I avoid all of them. I avoid all the Americans coming down to party, um so I have that view of living here as an American and seeing the culture. Then I have the view of having grown up in Arizona, and then not living there anymore, but also the view because of the internet. One of the good things among the so many terrible things about the internet and what that has exacerbated, I'll say. But one of the great things is the conversation of women, that when we can, even if it's in a social media aspect, and again, I don't work for TikTok, but I love TikTok. I'm not like trying to advertise for them, but I love them so much because I love TikTok so much because, and maybe it's my algorithm feeding it to me, but there are so many thousands and hundreds of thousands of women from all over who are having this great conversation of what it is to live in the patriarchy, what it is, what we're dealing with nowadays with this hypersexualization and in the male gaze, and also being gaslighted still. And women are finally, we're figuring out how we've been gaslighted, right? We've been told this narrative and we've been living inside of it, and silenced. And so coming out, especially I see a lot of women who are midlife, because when you get to that point and when you're done with menopause and your body is ready to just has no more fucks to give, so you're just in a different place than you were in your 20s and your 30s, to start realizing of what we've been conditioned to think about the world around us and about ourselves. So what's fascinating to me, and I really want to point this out about even the word of being sexualized, about hypersexualized, is what I see is I think we need to even have another term for it, because sexualized implies adulthood, right? And what I see is a lot
yeah.
of, how do you sexualize children? Children can't be sexualized. That's on the viewer, right? That's on the so that's a problematic term for me, because a lot of the sexualization that I'm seeing is for, and this plays into, the women who are looking like these AI dolls now, is they're getting rid of all of their body hair. They're getting, so their skin is just smooth, right? So what do dolls look like? They look like little girls, right? Um, and so that's what I'm really interested in, as far as like, well, wait a second. It's kind of like how, underage women, like that's those two don't go together, right? It's
Yes.
child. And what is there's this great TikTok trend. So there's always these trends on TikTok, and one of them is these women calling out men who are saying, you know, when you have like a relationship of a man who's like 25 years older than the woman, and they're like, well, the age of consent is this, the age of consent is 18. And it's like, who created that age of consent? And if the age of consent were 16, men would be with 16-year-olds. And if the age of consent was 14, they would be with 14-year-olds, right? So I just love that of just going into the deeper, like looking behind these terms that we're giving, like the sexualization. And as far as my view, I have been on the inside of the statistics. I was almost a statistic. I was in an abusive marriage with a diagnosed
Sorry to hear.
narcissist. Who I found out about his double life, grooming immigrant Ukrainian girls who were in our town for work, they were legally old enough so he wouldn't get his ass thrown in jail, but they weren't even old enough to drink. And he groomed a group of them and eventually got one because she needed a green card. The age of our oldest son. So like 27 years his junior. So I have had that view of not just watching this man with money and power groom a young girl beautiful girl who looked like she was 14 years old, even at 19, right? And what that all includes, but then also that, you know, of being in an abusive marriage where I know what it is to be controlled and to be silenced, where you can't, you nobody can reach you, right, to help you. So anyway, so with all that dynamic, and now I'm living in Mexico, looking like it's just like, whoa, I feel like I'm taking in all this information from all these angles. And I love that as far as, especially on TikTok. I don't see it on the other. I feel like Instagram is like almost like a homecoming thing where you have to, I don't know, there's something weird about Instagram I'm a little scared of. That's where I'm seeing all the filters and the, you know, Ozempic, and oh my God, it's crazy. And then Facebook is where people actually know you. And so it's kind of like you're afraid to be honest. So TikTok is where I'm seeing the conversation happen with women who are calling out everybody. They're calling out not just men, they're calling out systems. And they just refuse to be gaslighted anymore, you know?
No, absolutely amazing point there. Especially, I love the fact that you brought up something like the age of consent, because if you really think about it, it was supposed to be protective for women. It was not supposed to be something that a man can exploit in order to have sex with someone significantly young. And in certain states, for example, in the US, I believe the age of consent is quite low. And then obviously in the East as well, for us, I believe the age of consent doesn't really matter in most of our countries because what's it called? Child marriage exists. And even I was originally supposed to be married at 13, but you know, thankfully for me, that didn't work out the way that it was supposed to. But coming back to also the parts that everybody's kind of mentioned, and then to Natasha, I wanted to bring up when we talk about the ways that things have changed, one thing that stays certain is that women are never actually going to meet that standard. You know, the standard that's set for us to be beautiful, to be lovable, to be worthy. In reality, that standard has always been there. And it's just unreachable. That's one thing that's been constant. So I wanted to know from you, like, how do you contend with that? And where do you think we ought to go from here? Do we
Yeah,
let go?
sorry to talk over you. Thank you. So
No,
many.
go.
I just wanted as well, before I start, Susanna, thank you for your courage and sharing that about your personal story. And I'm sorry that you went through all of that, and you've obviously come out stronger. And, you know, I just wanted to pay tribute, really. But I'm really, yeah, from what you say about those standards, they're designed to kind of be impossible, aren't they?
Yes.
It feels to me. And I think what we've been talking about the excessive sort of girlification of our culture. I don't know how else, this sort of idea that we all have to be super young, almost childish. It was just that was thrown into such a sharp light, wasn't it, for all of us recently with the release of the Epstein files? And I think that really brought into the light something that a lot of us have been talking about, being aware of for a long time, which is how, although obviously paedophilia, is seen as a crime, overtly, that's the sort of what everybody say, well, this is disgusting. In fact, it's so accepted throughout our society, so long as it's kept kind of hidden, and that sort of the treating girls as sex objects, starts so young and is so pervasive. And we saw how, with the release of the Epstein files, so many people were supporting him in his grooming and trafficking of really young girls. And he was able to do it kind of out in the open. And the guys around him, and a lot of the women too, were just accepting it and even saw it as something a bit exciting because he was actually daring to do it, this sort of hidden thing. So I think that was scary, also kind of a wake-up call, I feel, for a lot of women, helping us to kind of bring that into the light and saying, a lot of the power structures around us are founded on this kind of exploitation of girls, of children. So, bringing it into the light is important. And again, I think you're so right, Susanna, in what you say, that on social media, we see women bring it into the light. We are talking about it. But who are we talking about it with, and where can we move it on? Because obviously there is this danger that we're seeing on the internet at the moment of this increased polarization between the media that women are participating in and the kind of discussions and culture that men are participating in, and this increasing sort of separation. And in my most recent book, I look at the development of online misogyny and how, in Living Dolls, I write about online pornography, but it's in its very early stages then. And I'm talking about how, the kind of the pornography that people can access gets more and more and more extreme as sort of boys dare each other on, or they're seeking this sort of thrill all the time, the kind of mainstreaming of more and more extreme pornography. Now, of course, 16 years later, that's reached such a terrifying level. And I quote researchers in Feminism for a World on Fire saying, sexual violence is absolutely mainstream pornography now, whereas it really, really wasn't in the past. It definitely wasn't before online pornography. And even in the early days of online pornography, most pornography was not violence. So, men and boys are seeing this kind of violence against women for sexual thrills, and it is being shown to every man and boy on the planet. We are kidding ourselves if we think that we can protect boys from it. And boys on the internet are being fed increasing misogyny around that, increasing sexism. So you've got this terrible polarization, I think, between young women and young men. And you can see that in surveys on young men and young women's attitudes towards feminism, towards equality, towards wider politics. And I think that's very scary. So yes, I think there's this good thing, which is that women have more shared understanding of our experiences under patriarchy. But I suppose that the questions that we're going to want to be asking, over the next months and years is, and how are we going to channel that? Not just to change ourselves and make ourselves stronger, but to change men and to bring down the patriarchy. That's obviously what, the doors that we need to be going through now, right?
Yes.
Mhm.
Honestly, you brought up such strong points there, especially considering I never thought about this now. I'm not really sure about the age group that we're all in. I'm in my early 30s. So growing up, violence was such a big part of the way that people talked about sex. And To the point where people just assume it's normal to be choked. I know men my age, younger than me, who want to talk about the way, even the language, isn't it? Like bang and like you know, I'm sorry if can I say the words, Patsy? Is that okay?
Of course, yes.
I'm sorry. Um, but you know, you want to take her and you want to gang bang and all of those things, those kinds of terminology, you almost get so desensitized to the point where
Mhm.
when you said this wasn't the way it always was, that was really eye-opening for me because I always assumed, oh, it's always been really terrible and it's just more out there in the world now that we
Yeah,
have social media.
I don't want to talk over you, but I suppose I should just correct myself. There has always been violence. There have always been violent men. There has always been rape. You know, we can see
Yes,
that
yes, yes.
always in culture. But yes, I think it wasn't as in the mainstream, beamed into
Yes, just
every boy and
overt.
man's consciousness. You know,
Yes, no, that's honestly, and you didn't actually have to correct yourself, but yes, agreed, absolutely. Like in the way that the way that you said, it's just out there to the point where it's normalized. Like there was a time it was taboo, and now that element of being taboo no longer really exists. So, Martine, your article, I believe you did quote forgive me if I'm not saying it properly, Ways of Seeing by John
Yeah.
Berger. Yes, and it is a really good book because I love the way that he talked about the woman in the painting and she looks in the mirror. And
Mhm.
it's just a very interesting premise because that really stayed with me and it's such an old book. So would you also talk a little bit more about how you approach that subject and what you think should be the takeaway as well?
Yeah, I found it so eerie because yes, it was originally written in the 70s and yet it feels not only accurate but also so ahead. Like it was written way before social media or even
Yes.
mainstream pornography became a thing, and yet it is so accurate in describing the way that women have, I guess, almost always been conditioned to view themselves through an external lens, like
Yeah.
somebody else's gaze. And it's a gaze that objectifies and, reduces a woman to an object of visual pleasure. Um, and I also wanted to point out a connection because we've mentioned a lot of like very young women being sexually objectified. And that reminded me of an essay that I believe was written by Maria Castano for Fourth Wave. And it mentioned the fact that in the early 2000s, you had a lot of fashion advertisements explicitly sexualizing very young women.
Yes.
And this was around the time that Leslie Wexner was the owner of Victoria's Secret, of, I believe, Abercrombie and Fitch, of a lot of fashion, um, big fashion companies. And Leslie Wexner was a longtime associate and friend of Jeffrey Epstein. So there was an obvious connection there,
Correlation.
sadly. Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
And I think that's also something that Patsy, you can speak to. I think I'll just let you go. Yeah, go on.
Well, I just actually wanted to ask Martine, I'm not, even though I am the editor-in-chief of Fourth Wave, I don't feel I'm not as educated as you all on gender studies. I mean, I didn't get a degree in it or anything. I haven't read this book, The Ways of Seeing. But Martine,
Oh,
I remember something I'd love you to elaborate on. You mentioned that someone uh, envisioned being surveilled constantly as a type of torture
Mhm.
that and assumed that people would hate being constantly viewed. But now we seem to have moved into a place in society where people want to be constantly viewed and they put themselves out there. Look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me.
Mhm.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? Who
Yeah.
said that originally?
So
And
that was the Panopticon by Jeremy Bentham, who was an English philosopher. I forget if it was simply supposed to be a philosophical model or if it was an actual plan to build something like this for societal purposes. But basically, he envisioned a type of prison that is circular in shape. It's called a panopticon. And basically, all prisoners are exposed to a central viewer who's constantly surveilling 24/7 all of the prisoners. And that was supposed to be terrifying because the prisoners would have absolutely no privacy. They would be aware that they are being observed 24/7. Like it would almost be psychological torture, right? And then you have social media, which has become eerily similar to a type of panopticon where you put yourself as an object of view for virtually the entirety of the world, like the entirety of the internet. And somehow a lot of people do not perceive that as being dystopian or terrifying. They perceive it as being exciting, like, you know, sharing images of yourself. And yes, they are very curated and selected images, but still there is that sense of wanting to be an object of voyeurism that for some people is incredibly rewarding and validating and exciting. And especially when you pair that with the male gaze and the desire to be the object of the male gaze, it's very uncanny and dystopian. Yeah.
Yeah, I find that so intriguing, that idea that what was envisioned as a torture is now like a dessert that people are addicted to. They want it. And how did that change come about? And how can we get rid of it? How can we, I mean, what are the steps we could take besides talking about it? Talking about it is great, but you know, it's weird. As I get older, it feels like I am just less hypnotized by all the forces telling women be this, be that, and I see through it better. And I don't know if it's because I'm not, you know, young enough to participate in the in that culture, or if it's that I'm wiser. I don't really know, but I find a lot of it, a lot of the objectification, unattractive. You know, I don't see what's attractive about a woman who looks like a sex doll. I find it repellent. And so I don't understand young men wanting, why don't they just get a sex doll? Why have all the trouble of a human being who's going to have opinions? You know, why do you want to make a human being look artificial? And why do women want to do that to themselves? I don't know. I'm at a loss.
Natasha, I think you also wanted to add something, so I think go ahead as well.
Sure. I think, well, you know, why not just get a sex doll? Of course, more and more men are in relationships with AI and with sex dolls. You know, Laura Bates's last book about the new age of sexism, about AI and misogyny, is very interesting on that. I suppose one of the things I say is, you know, these conversations are really important, but one of the things that feels really vital at the moment, and I'm sure you're all thinking about this and doing this as well, is also meeting people in person and face to face in order to try and build alternatives. Because, of course, when we meet people face to face, it is a really different experience. You know, here we are right now, we can see each other in the screen, it'll be recorded, there will be on screen. When I've been doing in-person events around my book, and I feel there's a real, it's really interesting actually, there's a real hunger, I feel, among readers to meet writers in person. And it feels like it's growing, as though, because we're losing people's trust that what they read on the page or what they see on the screen is really human to human connection, because of the rise of filters, because of the rise of AI and writing and everything, that there seems to be this growing desire for people to actually be in a room with the writer. And I'm finding that really interesting. It's quite tiring because I'm going around, you know, doing these events in bookshops and so on, but it's also really, it can also move into something energizing, because you do feel you're actually part of communities where people are trying to create change. And I do find that exciting. I mean, obviously there are campaigns at the moment trying to hold you know, particularly the tech platforms to account for the way they're promoting online misogyny and pornography. But as you're all saying, it's deeper than that, isn't it? It's not just about the stuff that crosses a line. So that is really important to hold tech platforms to account on that, about the pornography, about the objectification of very young girls and so on. But it's also about the stuff that doesn't cross the line that you've been talking about, which is just about how we're becoming just so much more self-conscious. And, you know, feminists have been talking about this for a long time. I mean, Mary Wollstonecraft back in, you know, the end of the 18th century was talking about how women spend too much time thinking about their appearance, living in that gilded cage that she can't escape from. And it's important for her to get educated and develop her sort of moral character, you know, and get away from that. And of course, in the second wave, you know, feminists like Germaine Greer was absolutely brilliant about how women have to free themselves from this female eunuch, this sort of, you know, this kind of sexualized but sexless doll that she saw being put out there, and get back in tune with their real sexiness, you know, their real desires, their real ability to be a real sexual being without being objectified, which was so interesting. So I think, you know, it's been discussed, it's being talked about, and yet it's, I just feel right now, as we all do, these forces where patriarchy meets capitalism, meets these advances, changes in tech, it's so huge. It's really hard to, at the moment, battle our way through them, but I haven't given up hope.
Honestly, neither have we. That's why we're here.
Yeah. I mean, we can't give up hope, right? It's for us, it's for our futures, it's for our daughters and friends and their futures. It's for women across the world. You know, we have to keep fighting. And one of the things that kept me going when I was writing Feminism for a World on Fire is trying to take the long view and the global view. And,
Yeah.
you know, seeing how things have been really, really terrible for women at other times and in other places. And women fight back, women come together, women resist, women do make changes.
Yes, I think mobilization is a really important tool. Now, I do have a question. We're getting very close to end, but before that, I know that Susanna, you also have something to say, so why don't you go ahead and add it?
Oh, I really want to Natasha's point, first of all, as a not just a writer, but as an author and a published author, and I have a book that I'm currently serializing on Substack. I'm trying to do something new. I would love to get out and talk to people. I would love, love, love. So taking into consideration that there's a lot of people, like a lot of women like me who, like, yes, I'm in Mexico. I'm my elderly mother's caregiver, sole caregiver. I don't get out anywhere. I can't. I'm very much stuck. It was the same idea of when I was in my when I escaped my marriage, and then when I became a single mom, and tried to come back from the brink of complete and utter devastation across all rates, including financial devastation. So all I had, because I was so trapped per se, I had no option. So all I've had is my writing, is to get online, is to talk. And that's why I keep doing it, because there's something in me. So I'm the mom of 3 sons, right? So whenever I have a, you know, the whole topic of men, I raised 3 of them on my own. You know, even when I was married, I was a single mom. And so they're all grown now. My youngest is 23, and they're all amazing men. But I will tell you that it's very hard not to have a very grim look of the reality of what men are facing, because I fought blood, sweat, and tears to keep my boys safe. But it was just me, and they had 0 male role models. So, but then they're in school and then they're teenagers and I can't control that, right? And then the whole idea of putting the, how society puts the blame of the sons onto the moms
Yes.
instead of onto the fathers
100%.
where are the fathers? Um, so I think I don't know what sort of little rebel has existed in me since I was a little girl and what carried me through an abusive marriage and decades of being silenced and then raising boys. And there's just still something in me that I'm like, I'm not giving up the fight. And the only way that I can do that right now, again, I long for the day I can go out, I can have a book tour, I can go talk to people in person, but for now that for a very long time, that's what I've had. But so I just want to validate Natasha's point of it's pretty dark out there, and I have the insider's view of it, having raised three sons and saw the forces that are it's just tough to fight. It's tough to fight, but I'm not going down with the ship.
No,
Thank you so
honestly,
much. Sorry,
yes,
just want to
go on,
say,
Natasha.
I hear you. I'm the mother of a son as well as a daughter. I have a 17-year-old son who's a lovely young man, but it's hard what boys are going through as well as what girls are going through. It's really difficult. I haven't given up on men. I haven't given up on boys,
Do you
but it's,
address it?
it's tough.
Can I ask you, Natasha, if you address in your book, Feminism for a World on Fire, which I think we're going to hopefully discuss on another live stream, how to protect sons or guide sons, or do you
Not
have that?
really. It is a
Mhm.
book about women and girls rather than men and boys. But I do say in it that I haven't given up on men. And I still do believe that, I'm the daughter of a feminist man. I'm the partner of a feminist man. I'm the mother of a feminist son. I believe that men can be feminists. And I think this is quite unfashionable in some feminist circles. And I get it. A lot of women have given up on men. I get it. A lot of women have been so harmed by men. I get that. I'm not trying to force that point of view on any woman. But I still think, this it feels like a battle. It is a battle, it is a war, but it's not always men against women.
We,
It's about those who are supporting feminism and supporting equality. Most of them are women against those who are trying to drive us down, to strengthen patriarchy, to strengthen authoritarianism, strengthen sexism, strengthen misogyny, mainly men. Some women are on that side as well.
Yes, honestly, first of all, thank you so much to you guys, as well as to any person, specifically mothers to boys who want a better world. Thank you so much for all the work that you're putting in, because it is rough out there, like Susanna said, like Natasha said. We even have whole algorithms that are designed specifically to push out really misogynistic stuff at young boys and men, and of course with the manosphere and stuff. I do have a final question before we start to close out, and I think we do have something in the live chats that I would like to get into as well. So. Coming back, the question. Now, one thing to understand is a lot of women who get on OnlyFans, a lot of women who are getting, like Sydney Sweeney, for example, who are trying to capitalize on their bodies and the kind of, um, what's it called? The feelings that they evoke in men specifically. The reason that they're doing this as well is because, unfortunately, like we've seen, we are starting to close out that gender pay gap in some places, but not others. There are still countries where women aren't even allowed an education, where women aren't allowed a choice. And then there is someone like an OnlyFans creator, like a Bonnie Blue, who is doing this because this is the fastest way for her to gain her own, you know, place in the sun, like she can buy her own property and stuff. So in a way, we don't necessarily knock it, but I'm not even going to say they have a role in shaping this. I think they are gaming a system rather. So I wanted to know, just generally from all of you, so you can speak at any moment after this, but what do you think would be the ideal scenario for women to feel like they don't need to choose their own exploitation in a way? Or would you even say that this is exploitation? Because I believe it's not, it is consensual, but you're still kind of, if I didn't do it, someone else would do it, you know? So is that really consent? I still need to make bread. I still need to provide for my family. So go on, any of you at any point, please chime in. And what do you think would be the right scenario here?
I just had a brief idea, which is, what if someone like Sydney Sweeney or someone like, the top OnlyFans girl got on there in her lingerie and preached feminism? Wouldn't that be wonderful? So I kind of remember Stormy Daniels at some point. Trump was going to give a speech, and she said, "Those of you who don't want to watch the speech, I'll be folding laundry in my underwear at 9 a.m. or whatever." And I thought that was hilarious. But wouldn't that be cool if it could somehow be, they could become a force for good, these girls making money on OnlyFans? How can we get them on our
On our
brigade here?
side.
I'm sorry I didn't keep track of the live chat. I thought I had it
Don't
open,
worry,
but I
don't
had
worry.
some.
We'll come to it. We I know we're out of time, but we will come to it. Go on, Martine or Natasha or Suzanne. Go on. What
I
would you say?
suppose my feeling is, I don't want to judge individual women. It's hard to know why individual women feel they have to make the choices that they make, but it's about looking at the context in which these choices are made, right? As you were saying, people still, women need to make bread. When the routes to power are very limited to women, this is a kind of power that women feel they can exert. This power of really getting the attention, getting the adoration, getting the money potentially. And a lot of women do feel, that is going to be the way, and that is going to be exciting, and that is going to give me status, and that is going to give me respect. And I remember, when I was writing Living Dolls and talking to the guys that edit these magazines, and they were like, what, are you going to close off this route? For a lot of working class girls, they think this is the way they're going to make money. They're all coming down to London, they're all flocking into the clubs, they all want to be on the cover of Nuts. Are you going to say no? And at a time of reduced social mobility, who's going to say no? These are, we've got to look at the system, is what I'm saying, in which women feel that those are the right choices. They get the attention that way, they get the rewards. Let's try and change the system rather than knocking any individual woman that takes part in it.
That's such an excellent point, because yeah, it is systemic, isn't it? Like we're kind of pandering to not just individual men, we're pandering to an entire system of capitalism that does live off our bodies, whether we're women and even sometimes men, but more specifically on the sexualization of our bodies, of children's bodies, like Susanna also mentioned. So, Susanna, do you want to add something, or Martine?
I would just like to
Um,
second Natasha's point about it's not about when I see all the Hollywood actresses on Instagram and what they're looking like and their bone showing, and then also somebody like Sydney Sweeney who is giving this illusion of that a woman's power is in her sexuality. I'm not here to judge that. On an individual basis. I am here. I find it sad because of what it speaks to and what it represents. But it's the bigger system. It's why are we here? Why are women doing these things? feeding a patriarchal monster that has conditioned us to think that we're here for that's the best that we have to give, right? That's the most that we have to offer. So it makes me, to be honest, I would say I just am filled with sadness when I see those uh women making those kind of choices, not because of the women themselves, like zero judgment, because it's completely understandable. I mean, to be perfectly honest, like I even understand why the girl who, and I'll call her a girl because she was, 18 years old, who, found her ticket to America in my ex-husband. I'm not here to judge somebody who is in another country and who is desperate to find a way to survive, to live, or whatever else. But what is that bigger system that is supporting the patriarchy that is supporting men like my ex-husband, right? To get away, not just get away with it. I don't care if it's legal for a 47-year-old to be with or a 42-year-old to be with an 18-year-old, it may be legal, but the fact that it's okay, and it's totally normalized, just makes me incredibly sad. I mean, look at like Leonardo DiCaprio. He's going to be dating like fetuses pretty soon. Like he gets older, they get younger. It's obscene, it's disgusting. And it just makes me sad that we're normalizing it on a general scale.
Thank you, Suzanne. Martine, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I was thinking there's a very strong irony here, I think, because you have a lot of women arguing that things like, sex work or OnlyFans or other such platforms are empowering. But the thing is that empowerment lies in, turning yourself into a sexual object and an object of sexual pleasure, which is ironically the very thing that has been the exploitation of women for so long. And so the question is, why does empowerment have to be limited to this specific way of turning yourself into a sexual object, of sexualizing yourself so much? Why aren't we talking about different ways that women can empower themselves? So, yeah.
No, that's a very interesting point because at the end of the day, a lot of what we've talked about so far is either like Patsy brought up, women who are opting into turning into that fantasy, or of women who are suffering the consequences of this fantasy existing in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
At least in my country, and honestly, I am from the Middle East, so we have a lot of stories just like this of women who look a certain way getting raped because, and I think one of the people in our live chat made this point, if I'm not, yes. So there is someone called Deborah Niles 6054 who says, I think we used to have women who deserved respect and women who didn't. Keyword deserved. I think the backlash to women being more independent and outspoken means that none of us deserve that performative respect. And I think with men, it is haves and have not. But with women, it is respectable or not respectable, that madonna-whore thing. And at the end of the day, no matter what you do, it's like you're walking on a tightrope. You could fall at
Mm-hmm.
any time. There's no real way, like, and you're not making that assumption. Like I'm wearing this right now. I'm wearing just like a kurti from my mother, but I could have been wearing something with a lot of cleavage, and I've done that before. And someone would tell me, "Oh, I don't deserve respect. I don't deserve to make
Mm-hmm.
money, and I don't deserve to call myself a feminist." But at the end of the day, you can't really it's a weird immeasurable thing because to one man that person is respectful because oh she's got her hustle, and then to another man she's someone to exploit. but who is she really? And I think that is the reason why we all write, isn't it? Because everybody has assumptions about us as women. And then when we write, we say, you know what? I don't need to be what you think I am. I get to be who I want to be. And that is a privileged stance, but it's also a deeply empowered stance where you get to decide who you are. And if we gave more women platforms to be who they are without immediately going in for the jugular, then I think we really get somewhere with it. So I guess that's me answering my own question. Sorry. And we have another question. Julie Varley, 3969 asks, does the panel think that women who have less resources are more vulnerable to hypersexualization? And if so, how do we begin to deal with this? I'll leave it to you guys first.
I think, yes, that women with less resources are more vulnerable to exploitation. Although obviously that isn't always the case, and we see women that we think might have, more, also falling into that. But certainly there's this intersection, we have to be really aware of gendered inequalities with class, with race, with disability, and so on. All these things can come into play to further disadvantage women and make it more liable that they can be exploited, they can be objectified, they can be subject to violence or exploitation with impunity. Because as we know, so often if a woman tries to then seek justice, is she the perfect victim?
Yes.
Is she middle class? Can she speak for herself? Is she white? Is she sort of respectable? That all of that can sort of come into play. So obviously it's not as simple as just saying, all working class women are vulnerable, middle class women not. I mean, no, I think the patriarchy is such that women throughout society are vulnerable in this way. But we have to be intersectional about this, I think, and recognize that some women are more vulnerable than others.
To exploitation, yes.
Mm.
Absolutely. Patsy, I think you wanted to say something too.
Oh, well, I had a couple of things. One was that idea I had. There is a YouTuber named ContraPoints who's a trans woman who debunks a lot of incel and conservative mythology and does it in a very flamboyant, interesting way. So maybe that's where I got that idea. I had read a story about a red pillar who got detransitioned or whatever, pulled out of the pit by ContraPoints, among other people,
Ah,
making entertaining videos that speak truth. And then now I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, just yes, women with fewer resources are vulnerable, and we really need men. We need men to change their definition of masculinity from harming women to protecting women. Isn't that the way they always portray themselves in every action movie you've ever seen? I'm the protector, I'm the savior, I'm the hero. And yet, online and in today's society, nobody's taking up that mantle. Nobody is saying, yeah, it's wrong to hurt these girls. It's wrong to marry these girls. It's wrong to exploit these girls and women, not just my daughter, everyone's daughter, everyone, every woman in society deserves respect and protection. We need men on board. Instead of this fight, we need to get them on our side. And I think, a lot of them are. Tasha mentioned she's married to one. She has a son. She has a husband, a father, all feminists. So, how do we create more male feminists? That's what'll move the needle. We can complain and object, but it's not until men change their behavior that things get better for us.
Patsy, I just want to say it's funny that you brought up the protection from men because that was also a trend on TikTok of women well, men are supposed to protect us from whom? Men, right? and the irony of that. But I would like to second what Natasha says is absolutely women with fewer resources are more vulnerable, but understanding, and that's what feminism really is, isn't it? Is understanding that it is intersectional, and that understanding that a white woman such as myself will have a very different experience than a Black woman, even if we're the same age, even if we're raised in the same state. So understanding the various dynamics of that, I think is what is really really the meat of feminism, to understand that we're, how race, gender, and class play into the dynamics of a woman, no matter what her age is, and the position that, or what time that she lives in, that there's still all these different factors to consider.
All right, Martine, do you also want to add something and then we'll...
Yeah, just wanted to, I agree with everything that's been said. And I think education is so important throughout all of this, because I was thinking, among other things, that for women from a lower socioeconomic background, there are things such as education, a college education, which are simply not accessible. And again, that might just play into the idea that the only way that you can empower yourself financially or, mentally is through exploiting yourself sexually, and that there is no other access to forms of empowerment for women who do not have access to things like education or pursuing a career or things like that.
Yeah.
All very, very amazing points, because all of them come from such an honest place, isn't it? We're all sort of in a space where we do want to make room for intersectionality. And honestly, from my end as well, just to answer the question, I don't just think that they are, they use the words more vulnerable. I think they are actively and deeply exploited, at least where I come from. Now, look, I'm not really going to talk about the Middle East here. I'm going to talk about India specifically, because this is imminent. It's now, and it's been happening for hundreds of years. We have a caste that's called, so we have a caste system. Now, I'm not Hindu, so I cannot subscribe to any caste. I'm casteless, basically, which is supposed to be the lowest class, I guess. And caste is supposed to be based on your profession. But now it's kind of just become a marker for classism. So even if you were, for example, a doctor of a low caste, if you went to jail for doing a protest, you would still be made to do the kind of labor that's expected of lower castes and lower classes. Now, there is a caste called the Untouchables, or the Dalit caste. And the women and girls that are a part of it, they are untouchable, meaning that if a Hindu of a higher caste touches them, they are they're sullied, they're made dirty. But at the same time, they are the most raped, the most exploited, the most sexually assaulted caste in my country. They are only untouchable insofar as if you have to give them a job, if you want to give them resources, if you want to actually help them. Now it's like, oh, but they're untouchable. They can't drink from the same glass and stuff like that. That's how people talk about it. And they still talk about it like that today. And I recently wrote a story about this, of a minister, a chief minister, who said the words, well, our books say that if you rape one of them, you are purified. And that's the reason why men can do this, because, a book said it. And obviously they're wrong about it, because who hasn't used, for example, an Indian book or the Bible or the Torah, any of them, to justify doing something bad to someone else, right? It doesn't say that. But the truth is, what scares me about, and there's obviously some really good, important NGOs that are working with this, and I have been very privileged to be in contact with them and be able to work with them. And but at the end of the day, it's one of those things where you really don't know if you can't even imagine what it's like to be where they are. And I think it starts there when we start to really see who that woman could be, that person in the intersection. Then you start to recognize who her imminent danger is. And then you start to also give her that anima that she needs, that psyche that she's not allowed to have, right? You start to see that she's a whole person. And when it comes to something like a hypersexualization, so for these women as well, to them, it's kind of like what we discussed earlier. Sometimes you don't feel like you have a choice. Sometimes you feel like it's either I will be raped or I can consent and feel like I'm at least part ways able to own this. And I'm not just a victim. Because I think that's something we're taught as women not to be. Don't be a victim. Don't be a baby. Don't cry about it. Don't talk about it. And so, yeah, I think the work, I guess, is it starts here. It starts in our little rooms where we write about it, talk about it, scream about it, um, try to support other women through it, not judge them, hopefully. And I think that's something that Natasha also did in her book. She mentions, it's not something that we need to judge, it's something we need to understand and move away from or forward from. And that was the reason, honestly, that I was so inspired when I saw, because honestly, I found you through your Instagram again. And I remembered that book. And I thought, holy hell, I really want to talk to this person. And I want the rest of us, because Martine, for example, when she also brought up a lot of really good literature, Susanna with her lived experiences, Patsy, I think we all have so many stories and interesting points to swap with each other. I'm really grateful that you all made it, to you, Natasha, Martine, Susanna, Patsy. I'm so glad you're all here. We got to have this conversation. I hope we can have another. And yes, I hope as well to Julie Farley, we answered your question. And if you guys would have some parting thoughts, please say them now, and then we'll start to wrap up.
I just want to say thank you. I've really enjoyed being part of your community today and having this conversation, and I hope it can continue. It's really been so interesting. Thank you. And it's so interesting for me, to revisit the book that I published 16 years ago in this new context. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you for coming as well.
Thanks for hosting, Sangeeta. You did a fabulous job, and thanks for lining up such a great guest. And I'm excited to be here. I'm excited that everyone is here. Thanks for coming, Martine and Susanna. It really makes the conversation
So much. Yes.
rich. Natasha.
Yeah,
Yes.
I also wanted to thank everyone. Thank you for inviting me. I'm honored to be part of this panel, and I would love to join you guys in the future as well.
We would
Wonderful.
love to have you.
Yes, thank you again. I love being here and talking with all of you. It's inspiring, it's empowering. And so I will go write.
You're
Continue.
right.
Great,
Yes.
great.
Yes.
Inspiration.
Glad to
Okay,
hear.
we'll see you
Thank
next week.
Yes, we'll see you next week. I don't think we have a topic yet, but as soon as we do, you'll be the first to know. Everybody on YouTube, please like, subscribe, drop your comments if you have more questions, especially for our guest, Natasha, and for our other speakers today, Martine and Susanna, or for us on the editorial team. And also follow Fourth Wave and be a part of the conversation. Thank you so much to everyone who's here. I'm so glad to have you guys. Thank you.